My name is Noah Whitaker, and on Christmas Eve, my mother handed me a flour-dusted apron like it was a birthright. The oven hummed, the asparagus hissed in the pan, and the house filled with the glassy clink of crystal. We only touched when important people came over. 26 place settings, each one a mirror, held to my place in this family, polished, quiet, invisible. Don't be dramatic, Noah. Family first, Mom said, straightening a napkin, as if that could iron out my life. My car to the airport was due in 40 minutes. My team was waiting in Seattle with renderings, budgets, safety plans, the kind of work that keeps the lights on for 28 people who depend on me. I told her I had to leave by 5:15. She smiled the way she does when she's already decided I won't. When the kitchen breaker snapped and the oven went dark, the room swallowed its own breath. My mother's eyes landed on me like blame. Guest laughter floated in from the dining room. Somewhere in the crowd was a woman whose handshake could tilt the next year of my career. I tasted metal as I reached for my coat. If you've ever been treated like the help in your own home, you know the moment you choose yourself feels like a trespass. The kitchen clock ticked like a stubborn metronome, while rain combed the Christmas lights into blurry ribbons across the window. Heat pooled around the oven, the kind that sticks to your neck and turns patience into sweat. I basted the roast and felt the pan hiss back at me, butter snapping like sparks. From the front hall came the bright clatter of arrivals' heels on wood coats shaking off water, familiar voices in their glossy holiday tone. My phone lay face up on the counter, 5:07 p.m. My car to the airport would nose up the curb at 5:15, whether I was on the curb or still trapped in this kitchen. Mom swept in the way she always did. When company hovered just beyond the doorway, chin lifted perfume, crisp smile wound tight like ribbon. She skimmed the island runner with her palm, as if lint could topple a reputation. "You can push your flight," she said without looking at me. "This dinner matters. We do not disappoint people." "I'm not disappointing people," I said, sliding the thermometer into the roast and watching the numbers creep. "I'm responsible for 28 salaries. Meridian meets us tomorrow because we did the work. If I miss the flight, I'm not only choosing against myself, I'm choosing against them." She pinched the apron I'd left on a chair and held it out like a summons. "You are choosing against your family. Important guests are coming. Carmen Duval is important. Presentation is everything." Dad's laugh carried in from the living room, too big and too quick, the laugh he uses when he wants people to feel comfortable in a house that has never been. Through the doorway, I caught Tessa's reflection in the hall mirror. Phone, above her shoulder, mouth parted like she was practicing surprise. The oven fan droned. The asparagus waited in a bowl, bright and slick, a small green army, about to go to war with a pan. My phone buzzed. Julia's text slid across the glass. "Slides are locked. Safety plan first, number second. We've got you. Safe flight, boss." My chest eased half an inch. The word boss belonged to a world that made sense. "I'm leaving at 5:15, I said, keeping my voice level. "Salad goes first, then asparagus, then carve the roast at the table so it stays hot. I prep the glaze. Dad can pour." I pointed to the labeled containers in the fridge, the serving pieces lined like a parade. Mom set the apron on the island and pressed her fingertips into the fabric. "Do not walk out on me," she said, and the polite surface shaved off her voice. "Everybody comes here to see how we do things. You running away tells them exactly the wrong story. Me getting on a plane tells them the right story," I said. "It tells them I built something that deserves to be in the room." Some arguments come from so far back in time, you can feel your 12-year-old self step forward and try to answer. I could hear the old script crackling to life. Ingratitude, attitude, the crime of ambition. I took a breath and reached for my coat. The kitchen coughed, then clicked, then went dark from the oven down. The fan stopped. A thin, stunned silence landed between us. Mom spun to the breaker box with a small sound that wasn't language. I opened the panel and flipped the main like I had 100 times, waited, listened. The lights flared and settled. The oven stayed a quiet, expensive rectangle. She turned back to me the way a storm does when it finds open water. "You can't leave me to fix this. You can plate the soup, I said, keeping each word gentle. It's hot. The roast will hold if you tent it. The asparagus takes 4 minutes once the pan is hot. If the oven doesn't come back, slice thinner and finish on the stove. You'll be fine. The line between her eyebrows deepened. You are not hearing me. I said. I've heard you my whole life. I slid my arms into my coat and felt the weight of my travel bag settle onto my shoulder. A simple, ordinary weight that somehow made my spine remember its job. I have to go. The front door opened and a gust of voices rolled down the hall. Someone called my mother's name with the cadence of a toast. She lifted her chin, smoothed her blouse, and in the space of a breath rebuilt her public face. Smile and stay, she whispered a command dressed as advice. I reached for the back door instead. Cold air jumped at my cheeks and licked the sweat from my neck. The driveway glowed with wet reflections and brake lights bled red into the puddles. My driver raised a hand through the windshield without honking a courtesy that felt like faith. Noah. Mom's voice didn't rise this time. It dropped. It sounded almost frightened, and I paused because I am not a cruel person. If you leave, people will notice. People always notice, I said, and I didn't mean the neighbors. I meant the way she had taught rooms to notice what she curated, not who I was. Tonight, they'll notice that I chose my job the way you always chose yours. I stepped out and shut the door with the softest click I could manage. The rain needled the hood of my coat. My shoes squeaked on the soaked concrete, the same small sound they would make later on a different polished floor. When I slid into the back seat, the heater reached for me with a warmth that felt like permission. I looked once at the kitchen window, a square of light with 2 shadows inside it, the past and the person who had shaped it. Then the car eased forward, and the house let go of me, and the city took me in. I wasn't there when the doorbell began its steady rhythm, but I could imagine the sound it always rattled through that house like a timer set on my mother's nerves. Guests shed coats in the front hall, laughter swelling to fill the corners of the rooms I'd just abandoned. My phone buzzed against the seat of the car as the city slid past my window. A photo from Tessa lit the screen, the breaker box door hanging open, black wires like veins. Her caption read, "Mom says it's your fault." I shoved the phone into my pocket and leaned my head back, but images kept coming through the dark window as if I could still see into that kitchen. Dad would have stepped up first, tying a towel over his shoulder, the way he did when he wanted to look useful without ever touching the stove. He would ladle the soup, his smile wide enough to crack his cheeks, while guests murmured politely. Mom would dart between rooms, apologizing with one hand while arranging a wine bottle with the other, every gesture rehearsed. And Tessa. She'd hover at the pantry door, phone raised, curating angles, even as the dinner crumbled. The moment Carmen Duval arrived, everything in that house would have shifted. I could picture it. The hush, then the surge toward her, the magnetism of a woman who never had to raise her voice to command a room. Carmen in a slate gray suit instead of velvet or sequins, making the holiday sweaters look like costumes. Mom's smile turning into a performance, her hand touching Carmen's arm as she steered her to the head of the table, the chair with the best sightline into the kitchen. Meanwhile, the asparagus blackened in the pan. Tessa sent me a video of Mom flapping a towel at the smoke detector, her voice sharp even behind the glass of my phone. The roast cooled by the minute, a glossy monument to timing gone wrong. Dad's hand, restless in his pocket, would have slipped out with his phone, and within seconds, he'd be whispering an order to the local pizza place, the one that had gotten trendy enough to be considered ironic cuisine. He would have tipped heavily, not out of generosity, but desperation. The delivery driver came to the side door. Tessa intercepted him with a conspiratorial grin, pressed a finger to her lips, and wheeled the boxes inside, as though smuggling evidence. The kitchen smelled of cardboard and oregano steam rising as she lifted a slice and watched grease halo through the paper. Then she looked toward the cabinet where our mother's crystal plates gleamed, relics polished every December. And that was when the idea bloomed, pizza elevated to heirloom. She laid the first slice onto glass, then another and another, arranging them as though plating for a magazine shoot. Cheese stretched, edges curled, oil shimmered. She carried them out with her chin up, each step echoing on the wood. Carmen accepted her plate with the same poise she'd shown at countless galas. She lifted the slice delicately, tilted her head as though examining modern art, then took a small bite. She didn't frown. She didn't smile. She simply ate her silence, sharper than commentary. Across the table, someone whispered. Then a laugh flickered. Others followed until the whole room teetered between politeness and ridicule. Dad refilled glasses, calling it tradition meets invention. Mom, desperate, declared, "They're artisan flatbreads." The words hung in the air like perfume sprayed too heavy. Still, the dinner stumbled forward, lukewarm soup pizza on crystal trifle to close. Conversation limped. Carmen asked about the neighborhood, about the charity board, never about me. Every we my mother spoke sounded brittle. Then came the neighbor's photo. A slice sliding across a crystal plate chandelier blazing overhead. The caption read, "Holiday aesthetic is a state of mind." No names, but the staircase in the background was unmistakable. Pronet devoured it. Likes stacked. Comments multiplied. By the time dessert spoons scraped the glass bowl, Mom's smile had sagged. Tessa, usually quick to perform, sent me one last image, our mother sitting alone at the end of the table, her hands folded, shoulders caved. Carmen raised her glass once more, eyes giving nothing away. I landed in Seattle to that picture, the cabin clapping for touchdown. Applause rattled in my head like utensils hollow and too loud. I told myself the house would recover from one night of embarrassment. I had no idea the embarrassment was only beginning to count its cost. Seattle air smelled of rain and jet fuel when I stepped out of the cab, dragging my suitcase across slick pavement toward the hotel awning. Inside the lobby glowed with garlands and poinsettias, holiday cheer pasted over the gray sky. My team had already colonized a corner near the fireplace. Laptops hummed, extension cords trailed like vines, paper cups stacked in a pyramid of caffeine. Julia waved me over, relief brightening her face as if my presence had been the one variable she couldn't control. "You made it," she said, handing me a fresh binder. Meridian's board wants precision. We lead with ROI, then compliance. Safety drills up front. Let's not give them a single inch of doubt. I set my bag down and tried to shake the kitchen off my skin, the smell of garlic and singed asparagus, the echo of my mother's warning. Here in this room, I wasn't the daughter. I was the producer who kept 28 people employed. We rehearsed until midnight, smoothing every transition, drilling questions we knew would come. Insurance writers, vendor unions, fire code exits. The rhythm steadied me. Work always did. Back in my hotel room, silence pressed in. I showered, pulled on sweats, and finally opened Pronet. The photo had found its audience. Pizza on Crystal now carried captions like "rich without reason" and "cardboard couture." Comments rolled by the hundreds. Some laughed, some sneered. All of them landed like stones. I scrolled until my thumb ached, then locked the phone face down. It didn't matter that my name wasn't mentioned. The chandelier in the photo was ours. The carved banister was ours. Anyone in Tacoma who had set foot inside that house knew exactly where it had been taken. And Carmen had been there watching in real time. At 3 a.m, my phone lit again. Tessa. I shouldn't have posted. Mom's furious. Just, good luck tomorrow. Not an apology, but more words than she usually spent on me. I read it twice, let the screen dim, and pressed the pillow over my face until exhaustion dragged me under. Morning arrived too soon, gray and sharp. Julia knocked with coffee and a muffin I couldn't touch. She studied me like a coach measuring nerves. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be," I said. We walked 3 blocks through drizzle to the Meridian Tower. Holiday lights sparkled in the lobby, too bright for the knot in my stomach. My shoes squeaked on the marble floor. My badge photo flashed on the screen as security waved us through. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing us in stainless steel and carpet cleaner. Floor 21 glowed on the panel. As we rose, I pictured my parents' dining table. Mom smoothing napkins that couldn't cover her shame. Dad pouring wine too fast. Tessa holding a phone like a shield. And Carmen biting into pizza on Crystal without blinking. Julia touched my shoulder. "Remember, this isn't charity. They invited us because we deliver. That's why you're here. I let the words settle. I thought of my mother's claim that leaving would embarrass her, that people would notice. People had noticed, but not in the way she feared. Tonight, in this glass tower, the noticing would shift. The elevator chimed. The doors parted onto a hallway of white walls and thick carpet, each step cushioning the storm in my chest. At the end waited the boardroom, all glass and angles, a stage where my name would either vanish or finally be heard. The boardroom spread out like a glass aquarium above the city, every wall transparent, every surface gleaming. The skyline stretched in gray and silver behind the rain-slick windows, as if Seattle itself were waiting to judge me. Julia and I stepped inside the soles of our shoes, making faint squeaks against the polished floor. 12 executives from Meridian sat in storm-colored suits, papers arranged in tidy stacks, pens poised as if to measure each word. At the far end, angled slightly away from the others, sat Carmen Duval. She hadn't been introduced, not formally, but her presence filled the room like weather. She inclined her head once in recognition. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it change my stride. Ms. Whitaker, the Senior Vice President of Operations, said, gesturing toward the screen, "We're ready when you are." I connected the remote, and the first slide bloomed across the glass wall. Attendance, metrics, revenue projections, year-over-year growth, each number polished until it shone. My voice carried steady, moving from chart to chart, describing not just what we'd done, but how we planned to scale. Julia advanced the visual stage mock-ups, traffic flow diagrams, safety drills, rehearsed like choreography. Questions came hard and layered, just as we expected. Insurance coverage if attendance doubled. Vendor contracts across union lines. Contingency planning for natural disasters. Each time I grounded myself in the facts. We'd done the math. We'd walked the halls of convention centers until our shoes wore thin. We knew the codes, the exits, the numbers. With every answer, I felt myself shed a little more of the weight I had carried from that kitchen. Here I was, not a daughter pressed into service. Here I was, the professional who kept chaos from touching a guest. Still, I felt Carmen's gaze resting on me like a second clock in the room. She hadn't spoken a word, but her silence was heavier than all the questions combined. I remembered her at our table, accepting pizza and Crystal without flinching. She had seen the theater collapse. Now she sat with front-row seats to my rebuttal. When the SVP finally asked about crisis management, the question I had waited for, I drew a slow breath. We don't improvise when safety is at stake. We plan redundancies 3 levels deep. If one generator fails, the second is already wired. The third is fueled and waiting. We rehearse evacuations until they are second nature. That's the difference between a vendor and a producer. We don't wait for the problem, we stage the solution before the curtain rises. A hush followed. Executives leaned toward one another, murmuring low. Julia gave me the faintest nod, her lips pressed tight around a smile. Outside, rain tapped against the glass like an audience. Then Carmen leaned forward at last. Her voice was smooth, but it cut cleanly through the hum. Impressive. You run your company the way you ran that kitchen the other night. Only difference is, this time no one tried to lock you in. Eyes flicked toward her, then back to me. My chest clenched, but I held her gaze. She let the silence stretch until it felt like a verdict, then added, "Boss, do you have a minute?" The word landed like a key sliding into a lock. Boss. Not a joke, not an insult, not pity, recognition. The SVP smiled faintly, and papers shuffled across the table. A letter of intent slid toward me, crisp and official, carrying the weight of 7 figures. Julia's pen clicked. My hand didn't shake as I signed. Carmen placed a palm lightly on the page, not to take it, but to steady it, a witness anchoring the moment. "Not every family recognizes what they have," she said softly. "But the rest of the world eventually does." She stood, adjusted her jacket, and walked toward the door. The glass whispered shut behind her, leaving the word she had spoken echoing in my head. Julia nudged me, her grin breaking through at last. "Boss," she whispered, testing the sound. "How's it feel?" I exhaled and looked at the city sprawled beneath us. Like I just stepped into my own name, I said. And for the first time, I believed it. By the time Julia and I returned to the hotel, Pronet had turned our family dinner into a punchline. The photo of pizza balanced on crystal plates climbed into the trending column, hashtags multiplying like weeds. Money without manners. Cardboard chic. Crystal catastrophe. Each caption stabbed in a different register. I scrolled until my eyes blurred. 1,000 strangers, none of them knowing my name, still felt entitled to laugh at the chandelier I had polished as a child, the staircase I had trudged up with laundry baskets. They didn't need the context. The image was enough. Then Dad's voicemail landed. His voice was raw, stripped of its party mask. "Noah, call when you can. Things got complicated after you left. People are talking." I didn't call back. The silence became its own answer, a boundary he had never expected me to draw. The charity board followed next with a politely worded email to my mother about standards of community hosting. I could picture her face as she read it, the careful facade cracking under a single paragraph. Years of curated image undone by cardboard boxes stacked in the pantry. Tessa sent a message that was closer to honesty than anything she'd ever given me. "It was bad, Noah." Mom cried after everyone left. Dad tried to laugh it off, but no one bought it. Carmen noticed. Everyone noticed. I pressed my forehead to the hotel window and watched rain thread down the glass. For years, I had begged for proof that I wasn't invisible, that my work had weight. Now proof came in the ugliest way possible, carried in memes and whispers. Julia knocked, balancing her laptop and a stack of contracts. "We've got deliverables," she said. Pilot timeline vendor calls insurance riders. The solidity of it steadied me. North Star was moving forward, no matter what chaos spun back in Tacoma. That night, in the too soft hotel bed, I let the realization settle. The fallout wasn't mine to fix. The embarrassment, the whispers, the shame that belonged to the people who had built their pride on controlling me. For once, I didn't feel the reflex to smooth things over. For once, I let the silence remain exactly where it belonged with them. 2 days later, I drove back to Tacoma. The house sagged under gray skies, lights still blinking. Inside, Mom sat at the table twisting a linen napkin. Dad hovered near the sink. Tessa leaned against the counter, phone dark. Silence filled the room until Mom slid a square of faded fabric toward me. "It was your grandmother's. I shouldn't have kept you pressed down the same way. I'm sorry." The words cracked something open. Tessa cleared her throat. "I took down the posts. I called an artist who could headline your spring event. It's the least I can do." Dad pulled a check from his wallet. For the car service, for the groceries, for what we didn't appreciate. I breathed deep. If we move forward, there are boundaries. You don't summon me last minute. You don't make me your servant. You don't mock me in front of guests. You respect my team. And if that slips, I walk. They nodded, each in their own way. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a cage. It felt like neutral ground where I could finally stand as myself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.